Welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to uncover a story that reveals more about leadership than any speech, medal, or official portrait ever could. Because sometimes the most important decisions are the quietest ones, the ones no one notices and history almost forgets. This is the story of a weapon, a choice, and a man who refused to separate himself from the soldiers he led. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why that choice changed how an entire army trusted its commander in the darkest days of World War II.
The pistol appeared on the desk like an afterthought. Small, elegant, wrapped in a fitted leather holster with polished hardware. It looked like something carried by a diplomat, not a soldier preparing to face the chaos of modern war. It was the Colt Model 1908, chambered in .380 ACP, and beginning in 1944, the United States Army issued it to every general officer in the theater of war. It was meant to represent authority, discipline, and distance from the battlefield. When Omar Bradley looked at it, he picked it up and studied the weight in his hand. 24 ounces, 7 rounds, compact, controlled, safe. Everything about the weapon suggested that the man carrying it would never need to use it. He turned it slightly, examining the polished blue steel, the precise craftsmanship, the careful design. And then he placed it back on the desk. What he reached for instead tells us more about the kind of leader he was than 1,000 official portraits ever could. Because Bradley's choice was not about weapons. It was about identity. It was about trust. And it was about what kind of general America needed during the most destructive war in human history. He had been born on February 12th, 1893, in Randolph County, Missouri, in a world far removed from the grand halls of power. Flat fields, hard winters, communities where a man's reputation was built slowly, through work, not words. His father, a school teacher, died when Bradley was young, leaving the family with little. He worked as a boiler maker, learning the value of discipline and precision long before he ever wore a uniform. A neighbor encouraged him to apply to West Point. He passed the entrance exam and entered the academy in 1911. The institution was unforgiving, demanding, relentless. But it shaped the officers who would command the United States Army through 2 world wars. Bradley's graduating class of 1915 would later be called the class the stars fell on, because so many of its members became generals. Among them was a young man from Kansas named Dwight D. Eisenhower. The 2 men became friends, but they were very different. Eisenhower had the instincts of a strategist and diplomat. Bradley listened more than he spoke. He observed before he acted. He avoided drama.
He rejected the theatrical style defined many military leaders of the era. If you enjoy deep stories like this that reveal the real human side of history, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which World War II figure you want us to cover next.
It helps the channel grow and allows us to keep bringing you these untold stories. During the First World War, Bradley never saw combat overseas. While many of his classmates earned decorations in France, he guarded copper mines in Montana. It was frustrating and unglamorous, but he performed the duty without complaint. That quiet discipline became a defining trait. He served where he was needed, not where recognition was easiest. Through the 1920s and 1930s, he built his career slowly. He taught mathematics. He studied. He attended the infantry school at Fort Benning, where a demanding and brilliant instructor named George C. Marshall recognized his ability. Assignment by assignment, year by year, Bradley was being prepared for a war that had not yet begun. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, he was 46 years old, a brigadier general who had never commanded troops in battle. The United States Army itself was small, underfunded, and unprepared. But Bradley's moment was coming, and that brings us back to the pistol. Since the earliest days of the American military, generals had often chosen their own sidearms. These choices reflected personality and style. The most famous example was George S. Patton, whose ivory-handled revolvers became symbols of his dramatic leadership. By 1944, however, the Army wanted uniformity. It selected the Colt Model 1908 as the official general officer's weapon. It was sleek, compact, and discreet. It could be worn under dress uniforms. It conveyed authority without aggression. The Army considered it appropriate because generals were not expected to fight. They were expected to command. But Bradley was not interested in symbols. He trusted the same weapon carried by American infantrymen, the Colt M1911, chambered in .45 ACP, heavy, powerful, uncompromising. A weapon built for close combat and survival in brutal conditions. And that decision mattered, because Bradley was the kind of general who went where the danger was. In 1943, after disaster at Kasserine Pass in North Africa, Eisenhower relieved the previous commander and placed Bradley in charge of rebuilding American forces. German armored units under Erwin Rommel had exposed serious weaknesses in training and leadership. Morale was low. Confidence was broken. Bradley did not begin with speeches or punishments. He went forward. He visited units. He talked to officers and enlisted men. He asked questions and listened. He observed how they trained, how they fought, and how they failed. He was not building a legend. He was building an army. And the men noticed. Because when he arrived at forward positions, he looked like them. He spoke like them. And he carried the same weapon they carried. That simple fact began to change how soldiers saw their commander. Trust in war is fragile. It cannot be ordered. It must be earned. And Bradley earned it the hard way.
In this final chapter, you're going to see Omar Bradley tested under the worst battlefield pressure imaginable. You'll witness the moment when defeat seemed possible and the quiet decision that helped secure victory. And by the end, you'll understand why his leadership style mattered more than any medal he ever wore.
When American forces reeled from the disaster at Kasserine Pass in 1943, confidence inside the United States Army was shaken. German armored formations under Erwin Rommel had exposed serious flaws in American training, coordination, and command structure. Units became separated, orders were delayed, inexperience cost lives. The myth of automatic Allied superiority vanished in the North African dust. It was in that moment of vulnerability that Dwight D. Eisenhower made a critical leadership decision. He removed the existing commander of the Second Corps and appointed Omar Bradley to rebuild the shattered formation. Bradley did not arrive with theatrics. He did not issue sweeping, dramatic declarations. Instead, he moved forward, physically forward. He visited front-line positions. He spoke directly with junior officers. He asked non-commissioned officers what was failing. He listened to enlisted men describe confusion under fire. He wanted clarity, not excuses. The transformation did not happen overnight, but it began with discipline. Bradley tightened command channels. He insisted on realistic training. He reduced unnecessary complexity in operational plans. Most importantly, he rebuilt confidence by being present. Soldiers who had felt abandoned by distant leadership suddenly saw their commanding general standing in the same dust, exposed to the same artillery risks. North Africa became the proving ground. Tunisia followed. Gradually, American units began fighting with cohesion and purpose. The lessons were hard, but they were absorbed. Bradley's calm, analytical style contrasted sharply with more flamboyant commanders like George S. Patton. Yet the results spoke for themselves. Where Patton inspired through intensity, Bradley stabilized through steadiness. Then came Sicily. Amphibious coordination, rough terrain, extreme heat, and determined resistance tested Allied forces again. Bradley's corps advanced methodically, prioritizing coordination and minimizing unnecessary exposure. He was not chasing headlines. He was securing ground. But the defining test arrived in 1944. The Allied invasion of France, the operation history remembers as the Normandy landings, required unprecedented coordination. Bradley commanded the American forces assigned to one of the most heavily defended landing zones, Omaha Beach. On the morning of June 6th, chaos reigned. Rough seas disrupted landing formations. German defensive positions overlooked the beach from elevated bluffs. Machine gun fire tore through the first waves of infantry. Casualties mounted rapidly. Communications faltered. Reports reaching offshore commanders painted a grim picture. At one point, the possibility of abandoning the beachhead was seriously considered. If Omaha failed, the entire invasion timetable could collapse. Bradley faced a decision that would define his career: withdraw and preserve remaining forces, or hold and risk catastrophic losses in the hope that small breakthroughs might expand. He chose to hold, not recklessly, not emotionally, but based on fragments of intelligence indicating that isolated groups of American soldiers were beginning to climb the bluffs and disrupt German strong points. He trusted that decentralized initiative, the courage of small units, could turn chaos into opportunity. And slowly, that is exactly what happened. Squads advanced through draws and gullies. Engineers cleared obstacles under fire. Naval gunfire adjusted. By afternoon, footholds expanded. By evening, Omaha Beach was secured at enormous cost, but secured nonetheless. From that fragile beginning, Bradley's responsibilities expanded rapidly. His forces broke through German defensive lines in Operation Cobra. They advanced across France with accelerating momentum. The encirclement at Falaise trapped large elements of the German army. Logistics struggled to keep pace with the speed of movement. By late 1944, Bradley commanded the 12th Army Group, the largest body of American soldiers ever placed under a single field commander. Over 1 million men ultimately operated under his authority, yet scale did not change him. He remained measured. He remained accessible. He avoided grandstanding. Soldiers continue to describe him as the WWII general, not because he sought popularity, but because he never cultivated distance. The symbolism of the pistol remained quietly powerful. While the Army had issued the lighter Colt Model 1908 to its generals, Bradley preferred the same Colt M1911 carried by American infantrymen. Chambered in .45 ACP, heavy and unmistakably combat-oriented, it reflected a philosophy. Leadership was not decorative, it was participatory. When Germany surrendered in 1945, Bradley stood as one of the principal architects of the Allied ground victory in Western Europe. Later, he would become the first chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, helping shape post-war American military policy during the early Cold War. But his most enduring legacy was not institutional, it was personal. In an era defined by massive armies, mechanized destruction, and global strategy, Omar Bradley demonstrated that trust remained the decisive factor in war. Not charisma, not spectacle. Trust. He earned it the slow way, by listening, by learning, by standing where the risk was real. And that is why his story still matters. Thank you for watching. If you value deep, human-centered World War II stories that go beyond headlines and into leadership under pressure, make sure to subscribe and stay with us. There are many more untold decisions that shaped history, and we're just getting started. I'll see you in the next episode.